Great. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hopefully you're staying warm or cold based on where you are, because it's a very interesting time of the year. We here in Colorado are trying to stay warm because it's snowing right now. But again, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to talk to you more today about our Masters of Arts in Corporate Communication program. My name is Shelby Javernick. I'm the Student Recruitment Director for the College of Media, Communication, and Information here at CU Boulder. We call ourselves CMCI for short, and we are the home for the MACC program, which is the Masters of Arts in Corporate Communication. Lots of acronyms around here. So if we are to say any of those and they're not resonating, please call us out and we'll let you know what those are all about. But I think we'll start by doing introductions, and then I can tell you a little bit about the purpose of the webinar. So I'm going to hand it over to Bert.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So glad you could join us today. I'm Bert St. John. I am the faculty director for the Masters in Corporate Communications program. And why don't I turn it over and ask Rich to say something?
Hey, everyone. I'll echo Shelby and Bert and say thanks for joining us today. I'm Rich Clafe. I'm one of the instructors in the MACC program, proud alum of the school as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about all that as we get going. So I will hand it to Meredith.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. Meredith Merrington, joining from Washington, D.C., also a proud CU alumni. Thrilled to be here as one of the adjunct instructors. And I'll turn it over to, I think, Alex.
Hi there, I'm Alex Parsons. I'm the program coordinator for the MACC. So happy to have you all here. I'm basically your point of contact from start to finish with the program before you even start your application all the way through graduation. And I will probably be popping off video to just help answer the chat and Q&A. So thanks everybody for being here, and I'll pass it over to Nate.
Hey everyone, I'm Nate Longmore. I'm a current student in the MACC program, and I'm also a digital communications coordinator for a nonprofit in the higher education industry. I'm super excited to share my experience so far, and I will hand it over to Patricia.
Thanks, Nate. Hi all, I'm Patricia Hogan, and I am also a graduate student with the program. I'm also in tandem the director of public relations for a technology company called Splunk. I'm really thrilled to be here and can't wait to dive in. And I think I'm passing it back over to you, Shelby.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So today, unfortunately, we can't see your videos, but we are excited to meet and hear about where you are right now in your career and how you think the MACC program will help set you up for success in the next few years and kind of your next steps. So I do want to call out, we have the Q&A function enabled. So if you have any questions, or if you just want to say hi, you can use the Q&A function and we can all see that and interact with you all. But truly the purpose of this webinar is to give you an overview of this program and help you understand how it will set you up for success in your next career steps, give you a sense of what the curriculum's like. Sometimes it's better to hear that rather than just reading it. So hopefully, for those who are audio learners like me, this will be helpful for you. And then kind of give you a sense of the landscape of communication and corporate communication and how this program plays into that. And like I mentioned, we'll set you up for success in a lot of different career goals. So that's our purpose. We also are excited to build connections with you. It's great to see your names in the attendees list and kind of from now till when the application is due. Myself, Bert, anyone on the call, along with Alex, are here to answer your questions around figuring out if this is a good fit for you. So I am going to pass it over to Bert now, who's going to give you an overview of our program and how it fits into the larger landscape of corporate communication.
Thanks, Shelby. So I want to provide you, as Shelby mentioned, an overview. So I'm not going to go very long into some of what's going on with the program, but at least give you some insights about what it's about. So before I do that, I did want to share another overview to the overview, which is that graduate programs, I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you are, some of this data is quite interesting. The Chronicle of Higher Education said last year in a report that they did about what's going on with master's degrees programs, they call it a surge. So I wanted to give you 3 factoids about why you are likely seeing people around you who might be talking about the kind of program that we're offering. So for example, over 10 years, from 2011 to 2020, 60% of 2,200 public, private, nonprofit, and private for-profit colleges, so 60% of that large number, all saw growth in their master's program. So that's quite interesting. Also, in those last 10 years, so many of these colleges, not a surprise, colleges and universities, added more than 9,000 master's programs across the country. That's since 2011, folks. But here's the one that I find particularly interesting. The Master's in Corporate Communications program is essentially, it's labeled corporate communications, but Rich and Meredith in particular can tell you more later about how really it's focused so much on the traditional field of public relations. And so if you keep that in mind, the top 10 fields with the largest number of increases of colleges and universities offering master's programs, the top 10 fields, number 10 is PR. It's lumped in with PR, advertising, and applied communication. It comes in at number 10, but here's something interesting. The raw number of colleges and universities offering PR and advertising master's programs is up to 507. That is by far the single largest in the top 10. The only other one that comes close, which you probably would not find particularly, well, it might be surprising. I'm a little surprised maybe by it. Econometrics and quantitative economics. So we're ahead of the people in the economic field. So let me say a few things. I'm going to share the screen here and do a little show and tell about what's going on with our program. This is a fully online program. Let me make sure I don't have any little things in the way here. Fully online, and it is a course, as we've just told you about, it's in a very high demand area, not just in the education, of course, but in the employment. And we'll show you a little bit about that in a moment. Now, corporate communication, you see the definition here, but that's really what I've been teaching. I was a former professional in field. I've been in academia 17 years doing research and teaching in PR. And before that, I was 15 years in the wonderful world of public relations. And that really is a definition that still holds up well for what we're teaching. Our really focus on this, we're going into our 3rd cohort in the fall, all right? So we're still building up, and this is why we have this webinar, getting awareness about how we offer some pretty distinctive ways of doing this online class. We want to be literally that go-to place for people to go to for this kind of education. And of course, it could be, as you see at the bottom of the slide, it's not really, even though it's labeled corporate communication, I didn't label it, but it is labeled that way. And it is about opportunities for people who want to especially look at for-profit, nonprofit, governmental work settings related to PR, or also people who just want to burnish up their skills. Maybe they're not directly in PR, but in allied fields, and they want to use some skills that we teach, or they want to career switch. So that's what a lot of this slide is about. The 3rd bullet point I want to bring up is that we are really looking the most seriously at people who have at least 3 years of some kind of full-time work experience. We can be a little flexible on that case by case. We like to promote that. We do have a certain level of flexibility, and we'll be willing to work with you if you might be missing that benchmark. But really what we're structured this program for is for the full-time working person. Of course, it can suit other people, but that's what we're looking at. If we can meet that barometer to help folks, then we think we can help most students. What you'll see from the faculty profile, and you'll see this from how Meredith and Rich talk about their backgrounds, they're endemic, they're a great episode, a great example. I'm trying to find the right word, the right E word, example, okay, of what's going on with our faculty. They have much more than 10 years of experience at high level in public relations. And you can see that from the subsequent bullet points here, and they come from a variety of professional backgrounds. So I mentioned earlier that not only is there a demand for what's going on PR and graduate level master's education, but look what's going on. We can see it going across here, particularly in the PR corporate communication arena. And if you look at the box right in here, you can see how projected employment in PR, it's doing pretty good in 2018, and by 2026, it's going to continue to grow. All right, so we see that this is a significant high demand area. And if you take a look at what's going on in Colorado alone, we're just using this as an example of just one state, you can see there's the national growth, and even in our state, we're looking at a 20% increase. So we're very much in tune to how this is a growth opportunity. Now, as I mentioned before, Rich and Meredith will tell you some more about what's going on with particular coursework. Richard has been a leader for our program. He developed this introductory course in strategic corporate communication and is teaching that. And then over here, what we call electives, but they're really not the traditional idea of electives, because you have to really, with some exceptions, take all these courses you see here to be able to successfully graduate in this program. So not the traditional way that we talk about them, but Meredith designed the internal communication program. And so that's for me. I'm done for now. I'll stop share and we'll.
Awesome. Thank you, Bert. So we're going to pivot into a Q&A discussion with our faculty and current students in the program. And then from there, we have time for any questions you all. We have time for any questions for you all throughout the whole time, throughout the whole Q&A. So feel free to throw them in there anytime. I do see there's some people who are telling us where they're from. Thank you for using the Q&A, because it helps us still interact with you in this webinar format. So we have quite a few people who are probably seeing snow today. So I empathize with all of you together. Okay, so let's shift gears. Thank you, Bert, for that overview. I'm going to tee up the first question for Rich and Meredith, our faculty on the call. Can you give us a little bit of your background? Bert alluded to more than 10 years of experience for both of you, well over 10 years at some really reputable brands and companies. So if you'll give us your background and how you got involved in this program. Rich, do you want to start?
I was gonna pass that honor to Meredith, but sure. Happy to start. So I'll try to go in reverse order. I got involved in the program after a conversation with Bert a little while back, where he had asked me if I wanted to be involved from a teaching perspective. Part of my history, which I'll get to, my affiliation with CU runs very deep. I'm on the CMCI Strategic Advisory Council. I am a two-time alum of the former SJMC, which has morphed into the CMCI. I have two kids, one who's graduated from the CMCI, another who's halfway through the CMCI. So I'm a donor. I'm all sorts of different things, and I've been teaching at the university level since the late 1990s. So it was an area that I was really interested in, and so Bert and I had a great conversation, and that's how I got involved. Background-wise, I've got just under 30 years in tech. I spent the early part of my career in public sector space, working in government on campaigns, things like that, and then pivoted into sales for a number of years, services, operations, communication, marketing. My current role, without boring you all to tears, my current role is I look after global integrated marketing and communication and different forms of stakeholder engagement for a large technology company called Oracle. Within that, my teams and I look after about a $2 billion piece of Oracle's business from a marketing perspective. Educationally, I've got a really focused undergraduate degree in political science with emphases in wildlife management and Japanese language. I also have a master's in integrated marketing communication and a doctorate from CU in media studies and mass communication. So all sorts of different professional and academic experiences, lots of fun. And I try to bring sort of both worlds, as I'm sure Meredith does, together into into my teaching philosophy and andragogical approach, so to speak. So more on that in a bit. I'll be quiet and let Meredith speak.
That's great, Rich. I've known Rich for about 20 years, and I learn something new about him every time I'm in a conversation with him. That wildlife management tidbit's going to come in handy at some point, Rich. So again, Meredith Merrington, I'm based in Washington, D.C. currently, but I'll take you back kind of through my career and how I got to being here with you all today. I actually also was part of the SJMC back when I was a journalism school, studied at CU, and proud alumni of University of Colorado Boulder, and actually then spent my career, pretty much my entire career, 20 plus years in and around Colorado. Before I decided to go try something a little bigger. I went to a small startup, you all might be familiar, Amazon, headed up to Seattle and actually led culture and communications in that space. So my career kind of over those 20 years was across corporate communications for it, like you were mentioning, right, in terms of that holistic view of internal, external, public relations, community relations. And I really landed, what I found as a sweet spot for me was employee communications and culture, and kind of this space that's vastly different than it was a handful of years ago, kind of prior to the pandemic. But I got my graduate degree in organizational leadership and change, not from the University of Colorado. Sorry about that, but then came back, right, to kind of talk through the program, kind of pivoting in my own career, kind of 20 years in, looking at what I wanted to do next, which part of that is teaching, and kind of looking at my career, learning from what I've learned along the way, help students learn from those lessons, those challenges, if you will, and actually have pivoted professionally as well. So I left Amazon about a year ago after about 5 years, relocated to the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm actually now a managing director recruiter for a communications talent search firm. So actually, in terms of that progression in career, right, and trying to help people understand what they're going to do with their career, entry level all the way through chief communications officers, helping them really understand their career journey. And from a student perspective, I hope that for Patricia and Nate and the other students in the program, that's helpful to help people understand what they can do with their corporate communications path and interests and trajectory. So long-winded there, Shelby, but hopefully that answers the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you all for that. My next question perhaps should have been first, since we've already thrown around these buzzwords quite a bit. But I thought, Bert, would you be willing to start us off with your definition as it's focused on this program of corporate communication?
Sure. Well, one of the best ways that I would think of talking about PR, because we do have students that are interested in either progressing in PR, moving into PR, or just find the skill sets to be quite useful for them, whatever the career path they're moving. And so I would say, and I would think most people could relate to this, is it's the kind of a practice where you are often dealing with an organization, but sometimes it's not just an organization. You might also be an advisor to a high profile individual, whether it's a politician, entertainer, social activist, what have you, where you're talking to these, lack of better words, I'll just call it clients. You're talking to these clients and advising them on how they can be in alignment. Alignment is a very big word. It probably needs to be used more in PR, but the ideal is to do a lot with working with the client as far as promoting communication, interaction, and listening that shows that the client can be in alignment with the word is used, stakeholders. We use that word so much in the public relations arena. So I would see that as a gold standard for, and our professors, our instructors in this program are doing a lot to try to help the students understand how that looks in a broad sense.
Great. Thank you, Bert. That was really helpful. I'm going to pivot to some questions for our students, current students, and hopefully that gives the attendees some insight into what it's like to actually be in the program, the rigor, the curriculum, how you're feeling so far. So Nate, I'll start with you, but Patricia, I'll have you answer the same question too. Nate, will you give us some insight on why you chose this program?
Yeah, so I have my bachelor's degree in communication and media arts, but I had graduated during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so finding a job right out of college was obviously more difficult than maybe previous classes had to deal with. And so I'd actually moved out here to Colorado for my fiance to start his graduate program, which he's finishing right now. And so I really thought that it would help me better prepare myself to join the workforce. And in the process of applying, I actually did end up in a career in communications while I was applying to different programs, and sort of stumbled across this one because my manager sent me the information for this webinar last semester. And it just kind of fit in perfectly with what I was looking for in terms of the next steps in my career, but also I needed something that was flexible, being that working full-time, I also freelance on the side. Like I said, I have a fiance, so I'm planning a wedding. I have a cat and dog who are always wanting my attention. So I just needed something that sort of hit all of those boxes. And this has done that so far, and it's been really incredible.
Patricia, what about you? How did you end up in the MACC program?
I had actually interviewed for a job, and the person I was interviewing with, while I didn't decide to go with that job, I loved working with him and interviewing with him. And then months later, he actually posted about this program on LinkedIn, and I took a look at it and I looked at the curriculum and I said, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I've been in public relations for over 15 years. But I was really looking to add some additional elements, some additional tools in my toolbox when it comes to showing up as a corporate communication leader. And this program had so many different dimensions in terms of from a strategic lens, but also from an internal communications lens, public affairs, crisis communications. It was just such a great way to round out my professional ability to move to the next level, that I looked at it and said, this is, and then also to look at who was actually doing the instructing on these programs, our practitioners and people who have been in the mix. And I think it's really important in communications to be part of that too. So I was really intrigued, and it's been fantastic. But that's kind of how I ended up at the university. But I'm actually based in California, so it's great because I can do it from anywhere. So I'm nice and virtual. So yeah.
Those like happenstance interactions are so interesting, like how we all ended up in this room together right now. It would be really fascinating conversation. Okay, so Patricia, you talked about the classes. So I'm gonna pivot back to Rich and Meredith, and then I'm coming back to you guys again to talk more about the coursework and what types of classes you're taking. Hear about that from the faculty and student perspective. So Rich and Meredith, can you go a little more in depth on what classes you're teaching and your teaching approach?
Rich, maybe you should kick it off since you.
All right, fair enough. So since I'm the gatekeeper for everybody. So as Bert mentioned, I teach a course called, basically strategic corporate communication management. We don't call it the intro course, but what it is it's sort of it's your induction course into the program. And what I aim to do there is not necessarily teach you how to be a corporate communicator. That's to Bert's point, that's something we assume you've got some background in coming in. It's more to say, let's level set on the types of topics that we're going to talk about. Let's level set on a particular lens through which we see ourselves as both practitioners, as leaders, and as scholars as part of this program as well. So, you know, there's 7.5-week courses. They're very quick. So each week we look at a particular constellation of topics that, again, begin with sort of tuning one's mindset all the way through to creating for oneself a sort of personal canon around communication. What are you going to take forward with you? What resonated with you? What questions? What didn't? And so the 7-week program, 7-week course rather, is designed really to set you up as a student for the rest of your program here. So when you take Meredith's class, you've got a bit of a grounding in things like stakeholders and things like, you know, communication KPIs and things like cognitive biases and how you see the world. And so bringing those things together is really important as a process of induction and a process of building rapport across the cohorts as well as they come in. So that's it in a nutshell, Shelby. Does that address?
Yep.
What you want? Cheers.
And then I think Shelby, you know, for the course that I'm teaching currently, which is internal communication, really in the design and conversation around design of that with Bert and actually also with fellow instructors, it's more of a practical class, right? So if you're coming out of Rich's course, you're going to look at internal communication and your employees as one of those stakeholders. And I work to design the class to be applicable, hopefully the next day when you're going into work, right? You're doing what we call tactical assignments, tactical conversations, tactical discussions and applications of what you're learning. And at some point, I'm hopeful, because this was one of the most powerful parts of my grad degree, is that you're going to bring that to the workplace and that you're going to take those learnings and it will be, if not immediately applicable, at some point when you're looking for that next role, next opportunity, like Patricia mentioned, in terms of how to elevate your own career, your own voice at the table on behalf of, in this instance, the stakeholder of employees. That's really how we look at it. And certainly keeping in mind, like Bert mentioned and emphasized, we know you're all working professionals. And so again, the hope is that your current career, your current job opportunity ties in some way to the program and that you're getting something out of it. But we designed the courses in that way just to kind of help you in that 7-week fast and fierce, that timeline, to help you kind of to move through that with that grounding that Rich mentioned. I think that carries through all the courses, and there's a similarity in all the courses amongst the instructors in that way too. So.
Great.
Can I interject another point that Meredith made me think of? I think it's really important to look at, as Meredith points out, the practical applications for these things, but there are different also types of courses. Some of them, for instance, the course I teach and one or two others are very applied, but they're also driven. It's sort of theory informing practice, and that's the philosophy we take. That there needs to be some scholarly grounding in a lot of these things to think differently, and then to apply those things. So there's different types of courses that one takes throughout the program. Some of them very, very highly applied. Some of them with some I wouldn't call it theory, but certainly some theoretical grounding that then morphs, that's then applicable down the line. Just wanted to point that out.
Students, Nate, Patricia, on that note, how have you liked the classes so far? What's the rigor like? Maybe even speaking to that balance of work life and class.
Should I plug my ears, Shelby, while they answer this?
Pressure, your instructors are on the call.
I know. There's no extra credit here, but
they're already through the knot hole with me. So
Patricia, do you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. That's a really good question. I think when you take you go into a program like this, it is all virtual. And I think for those of us, and we're all working professionals, I think that work-life balance is always a little bit of an opportunity for those of us in the program to take a look at it and say, how can you do that? I think this has been a really great opportunity for me to carve out time for myself. That's kind of how I look at it's an investment in myself. That's how I look at the program. So it's my opportunity to carve out my time to expand my horizons, expand that foundation that I have, and get to have exposure to a number of different people outside of the folks that I work with or I've had in my immediate network. it's great. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that. I think I found it as something that I can do during my evenings, on my weekends, things like that. There is enough time within my week to get that done. I think the instructors also work with you throughout the, as you're moving through, to keep you on track, to keep you, it's a pretty consistent effort, but I look at it as an investment in myself. And when I do that, I think it helps me, and what's great is all of the articles that you're reading, or, the areas that the instructors are pointing you to, are all things that help you in an immediate job. So for myself, I use it pretty much immediately, if not then the very next day. So I look at it as an investment in myself, but also an investment in my current job. So, which is great. I think, so I found an immediate benefit, and that time is well spent. So that's how I found it, but I'll turn it over to Nate.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of that. I think that for me, in terms of like time management, I'm more of a lunchtime type learner. I just kind of carve out 30 minutes of my lunch to do the readings or discussion board posts, and then if I need more time, weekends, evenings, it's not as intense as you would expect for being such a short amount of time. And even when there are weeks where there's heavier lifts, I feel like like Patricia said, the immediate application of some of the materials is so beneficial to me, especially being an example of one of the students with less than 3 years of experience. For me, as an entry-level employee and working under someone who has more experience than I've been alive, basically, I think that I am able to take back those materials to my manager, and we sit down and she's like, this is awesome. Let's do this. I literally have showed her assignments that I've submitted in the past couple of weeks. And we just kind of workshop them together after they're already graded. It doesn't matter. It's really cool to be able to do that and immediately apply things. But in terms of the rigors, to get back to the question, I think that the time investment is well worth it. And even though it is such a short amount of time and a lot of information, it's not overwhelming in my experience.
Thank you. Those are both very insightful answers. Patricia and Nate, I think, Patricia, your reframing of the purpose of the program, I think so often we can focus on like what raise you'll get after this or what next step in your career it'll take. But I think it's important too to know just spending time on yourself is really important. If it's something you want to do, like sometimes that's all you need is to want to do it. You don't need a justification after that. And then Nate, I LOL'd when you said your boss has more experience than you've been alive, because I'm inching towards that with the students I work with. So, but thank you.
I'm not going to call anyone old. I'm only 24.
Well, thank you both. Well, all four of you for providing some insight on the courses you teach, the rigor, kind of the lunchtime learning was a good insight too. I find myself doing that too when I'm taking classes. So I'm going to pivot back to Rich and Meredith. We're going to go a little higher level here. Why do you think this program is important and distinct? Why right now, and what needs is this program addressing in our society?
I think Meredith should go first this time.
That's fair, Rich. That's fair. I think it's curious. I was actually thinking about this as Patricia and Nate were speaking just about the program and their timing to join. And you think about the last few years, right? This coursework, this program would have been entirely different if we had launched it 5 years ago. And you kind of have seen the evolution. So to your question, Shelby, about like, why is it important right now? Because corporate communications in general, has more than proven itself in spades in the last handful of years in terms of how to navigate a global pandemic, global challenges economically, right? And how the communications and communicator plays a critical role in leadership, in management, right, at a particular company, and in terms of overall, I think just brand reputation, kind of that umbrella for corporate communications to whoever your stakeholder is. And I think, coming from that practitioner sense that currently the instructors are for the program, we've seen that firsthand, and so bringing that into the students in terms of applicability of what we've learned, for better or for worse. kind of through that, and then kind of helping them take that forward. I think that's a critical point in the program and in the, honestly, in the industry as a whole. So Rich, follow that. Add to that if you can.
That's just like that's a mic drop, all right. No, I'll piggyback a little bit off of what Meredith said, because every point she made I agree with, and I would add that the experience with COVID-19 also showed us not only how to navigate, but what not to do as well, because there's always so much to be learned in what you would not do or what you would learn from, and I think how to better ourselves from a continuous improvement standpoint. And I think, Shelby, that part of the importance, and I think Meredith hopefully agrees with me on this, is when you look at communication, you call it PR, call it corporate communication, whatever it is, it's a set of skills that and lenses and perspectives that you develop and can use either as an actual functional practitioner in one of the sort of baskets of things that go, investor relations, analyst relations, public relations, internal comms, whatever it might be. There are perspectives and skills that I think are vital in any field that you're in. And this is one of the really cool things about the cohorts we have, is people come from so many different backgrounds in terms of their professional experiences, in terms of their lived experiences. Some people are not professional communicators day to day. Some people come from a whole bunch of other fields. And so the exciting part is to see the skills develop and get applied, and the mix of perspectives and sharing that goes on across across people in the program, for people from different perspectives and different backgrounds in the program. So I think that's one of the really important things here. And to Meredith's point, we've been around, been doing this for a long time, and so some of the fun and some of the exciting part of this is to say, okay, so Nate buys admissions early on in his career. Patricia's in a markedly different place than that. She's got, she's a senior leader within a well-known brand. So how do we sort of, as instructors, create an environment that we're able to bridge the experiences of people and sort of find that common ground, and learn from each other's perspectives, whether it's, lived experience, whether it's professional know-how, whatever that might be. We're trying to create these communities of scholarship, be they ephemeral, 7.5 weeks a pop, but you're part of this sort of larger body of scholarship and community that goes on. And I think that's really, really cool. We're doing that here through the development of absolutely critical skills that you can use in literally any aspect of your life. There's got to be love of the game here too. It's not just about come in, tick a box, get a degree, and move on. Right? As your point, the raise, that's great if that comes with it. But there's got to be a love of the game for this to be able to apply those things in a way that does propel one forward. Graduate degrees alone don't do that. It's the application of those things and the application of the learning that help people propel their careers. So not sure if I went a little bit off the topic there, but I think it's really important to look at all of these things together.
Yeah, that was perfect and really, really helpful and insightful, and the perfect bridge to a question we got from the audience, from one of our attendees. So it's for Nate and Patricia, and it touches on the skill set that Rich was just talking about. So as students who are already professionals in the communication field or related fields, what is one of the greatest new skill sets you've developed during your time in the program? And I'll let whoever is eager go first.
I can go if you want to. No pressure. And Rich is going to like this answer because I think it's critical thinking. I think that it sort of carries through at least all of the experiences that I've had so far in the program, and it's something that you can immediately use. I think that when I'm thinking through a new problem, or even something that I've already been doing at work that maybe could, has an opportunity to be better, I think that being able to kind of step outside and think about new approaches, new ways to, find solutions to problems, and just sort of seek those opportunities. I think that's been one of the greatest things, and it still ties into, the internal communications class that I'm taking right now. It still ties into things that I've been doing for the last 1.5 years that I've been with my organization. It's still sort of an ongoing skill that's I feel like is always just in development, but I found that one to be the most beneficial so far.
Completely agree, Nate, completely. And I think for me, I think for when both of the courses that I've taken so far, including I'm in internal communications right now with Nate as well. We've been to both courses together in our cohort, which is great. I've found that it just makes me think about things that I might have I got my degree in international public relations. I've been in public relations 15 years, but what it's made me do is kind of stop and really think about what it is that I'm doing every day and who am I really trying to communicate to? Are there actual people that are behind the things that I need to do? So it's made me look at the things that I might do every day, but in a deeper way with another perspective, which is also informed by my instructors, but also my cohort members. So to hear how other students are approaching things or what they've experienced in their organizations is really helpful because it changes my perspective. I've been in business to business technology for years, but there are people in the program that come from business to consumer, or they're in education, just different perspectives that I wouldn't normally have, which has been really helpful. I think for me it's the different perspectives, but also even just taking a deeper look at the things that it's like, great, I know my stakeholders, but do I really know my stakeholders? Do I really understand what that means? And without that going deeper on that foundational level has helped me strategically work with my communications counterparts too. I work very closely with our internal communications team, and this has really helped me, build those relationships, but even how can I help that other team as well? So it's just been, immediate applications, which is, really, really great.
All right. Thank you for those answers, Patricia. I know you need to hop off, so I'm giving you the out right now. Thank you for joining. And if anyone has any follow-up questions for Patricia, I know she'll be willing to share her email with you all. So feel free to reach out to our email and we'll connect you.
Absolutely. Thanks all. I'm so sorry I dropped a little bit early, but please send in questions. I'll absolutely answer them. I would love to. Okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay, so I do have one more question for Bert, and then we have time for Q&A outside of that. If anyone has any questions that haven't been answered, we have time at the end of that, and then I'll go over deadlines and some other logistics. So if your question relates to that, it'll likely be covered. But Bert, the last question I'll end on, kind of tie a nice bow on this, is can you tell us the types of jobs someone can expect to get or be prepared for with this degree?
Sure. So more along the lines with the public relations space, if you're looking to move into the field, I would see this as being an excellent opportunity for you to have more skill sets and more aptitude building, so that, say, for example, yes, maybe you want to go in the corporate communications environment that would be a little bit more into organizational PR per se, being an in-house public relations person. But you can also, for example, set up your own shingle to start your own public relations work, maybe as a sole practitioner, or if you're entrepreneurial, maybe mesh up with a couple of other individuals and do that kind of work. You can also work at an agency. There are many different kinds of agencies that are hybrids of advertising and design and public relations. But I would like to step away just a little bit from traditional public relations and go, there are a lot of people in the marketing arena that appreciate having public relations insights. Same way in the sales arena. We have people in public relations, they have public relations skill sets, and they work at admissions at a university that does them very well, or they work at a think tank, or they're a public policy advisor. I mean, anywhere that you're going that you really could bring to bear both conceptual abilities to tell a story and tell it well, and do it in alignment with your stakeholders, and also the tactical abilities. So the kind of individuals we have, like Rich and Meredith, that's what they live for. They totally understand that, and they understand how that crosses against and for and with other disciplines. Let's put it that way. And so if you're interested in that kind of storytelling, counseling, advising, helping to get the word out, bring people together in that way to work toward common ends, this program will likely be a good fit for you. Rich had mentioned, don't just be performative. This is the kind of thing where you just don't show up to tick off boxes. You benefit with having a sense of a passion about what you want to do with this kind of coursework for your life.
Great. Thanks, Bert, for that. That did tie a very nice bow on the end of it. So I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, but we do still have some time. So if you all think of them while I'm talking, feel free to pop them in there. I wanted to talk a little bit about deadlines. So for the fall 2023 cohort, the deadlines to apply are, so if you're an international applicant, your final deadline to apply is July 1st. If you're a domestic applicant, there's a priority deadline of July 1st, and the final deadline to apply is July 15th. So you do have time, but if you're a planner like me, this is probably one of your last things to do before you decide. And I will copy and paste in the chat a link to the admissions page around deadlines. Bert, do you have something to add about that? Go for it.
About the application. I mentioned earlier that there was this aspect of 3 years work requirement full-time. Doesn't mean you have to have 3 years in any kind of the persuasion industries. Doesn't mean you have to be like in PR 3 years, advertising PR 3 years, what have you. It just means 3 years of solid work experience. And it doesn't matter if it's way outside, like say, for example, if somebody has 3 years of work in accounting and they have a degree in finance, why would we even consider accepting somebody? I'll tell you why we would. It's not only because they have a great ability to know how to think in certain ways and have practiced it well in the workplace, but there are natural, use the word alignment again, there are good natural alignments or fits with the world of corporate communication and PR. So if you have finance and accounting, there's an area called investor relations that's in public relations. So if you have questions about these kind of things, you can feel free also to reach out to me. If Shelby, if you would put my email address in the chat for them, I'd appreciate it. Then people can reach out to me. It's burton.st.john@colorado.edu. Final thought on this, much more interested in how the statement of interest, where you're saying why you're interested in being in this program, is vitally important. For my money, that weighs a lot more than, hey, I've documented I've got 2 or 3 years of work experience. I mean, that's great, but the statement is very important, and I'm always glad to talk with individuals about that. Thanks.
Perfect. Great. That was great clarification there. Okay, I put Bert's email in the chat. I can also put Rich and Meredith's too, if y'all are open to that. And then let me first put, before all of that, I'll put the MACC email in the chat. It's a good place to start if you're wanting to talk to any of us. Alex can get us all connected. But yeah, I don't see any other Q&A. So give me 1 second. I'll pull up Meredith and Rich's.
And this as well, but LinkedIn is another great place to find us. And happy to engage and kind of talk through, as students, prospective students are thinking about the program and career paths and kind of things, questions of that nature that you maybe didn't get a chance to or think of tonight. Email is fine, but nothing like LinkedIn. So
yeah, perfect. I'm gonna pause recording real quick. Awesome. So I'm gonna go for it, Rich.
Say a couple things, and I think Meredith touched on this as well. I think one of the things you had asked us also, Shelby, earlier, so what's your teaching philosophy and that sort of thing, and without getting into all of that at a deep level. And Meredith, jump in. I'm going to speak on our collective behalf, and not just the two of us, but Kelly, who's teaches ethics, and Pritch and Alex Mayhew and other instructors. We're all deeply invested in your success, and that's not a throwaway statement. We are deeply invested in helping you get to where you want to go. A lot of us are at places in our careers where that's the thing we enjoy doing. It's the thing we like to try to help other people achieve what they want out of the program, whether it's career-wise, whether it's intellectual, whether it's whatever it might be. That's one of the really big differentiating factors here. I think if you talk to any of the instructors, all of us are very deeply committed to sort of individualizing your journey with us and how we can help that along the way. And no joke, I would love to take a class with Meredith Merrington. No joke about it. Been at this a while. I'm sure there's things I'm going to learn from her perspective, from her expertise, all those types of things. And I can say that about a lot of my colleagues, which is a wonderful thing. So, do think about that. If you want to be connected into a community that stays with you and is invested in your success, that's one of the things I know we offer here as part of this program.
Shelby, I'd like to add, to put more emphasis on this. Everybody in attendance, you need to realize that one of the things that I noted both in my public relations career and then in too much of my academic career, that mentoring is always a very precious commodity, but sometimes hard to find. And so I have made it the watchword on every one of the faculty. I'm involved in all the selection and hiring, and I talk with all of them, not only about how many years. I mean, years are great, but if the individual doesn't have a mentoring framework, a heart of a teacher kind of framework, I don't bring them on. And so I see how they're doing development, how they're doing continuous improvement, how they're working at keeping that mentoring mindset front and center. So for my money, that's a very distinctive aspect of our program. And I'd like you to be aware that I consider that a bonus for this program. Too many times we see that people fail to have that. So I wanted to make sure that students would have that in this program.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Does any panelists or anyone have any parting thoughts? Alex, do you have anything to add that I missed? I know you're off camera, but just want to make sure I didn't miss any logistics there.
I think I can briefly talk about just kind of what we're looking for in applications since I'm on. For those who are interested in applying, along with the application fee, of course, there's a personal statement. We're looking for a resume or a cover letter, all of your transcripts from any schools that you've attended. And I feel like I'm missing something. Apologies. 2 letters of recommendation. So I just wanted to make sure to include that since I'm on here and we've got y'all. So thanks so much. If you have any questions about applications or the program, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the call.
Okay. Thank you all so much for joining. Let us know if you have any questions. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.